You know, we find people in their worst moments. They've suffered some tragedy. We're there to make sure that the Constitution's defended, that justice is served, and law enforcement is a piece of what we do. Yes, it's a tool that we have. We enforce the law. But when you look at the definition in the California Penal Code, we're called peace officers. Our job is lead them better than we found them. Even those people we arrest, there's a level of redemption that has to occur. Yes, sometimes people have to go to jail. Yes, sometimes have to get a ticket. But that's not really what the Penal Code says. It says we keep the peace. I'm here because I'm having fun. I love my job, and I love policing. You also mentioned that in the last 5 years we've had a lot of challenges in the policing profession. That's true. And what fascinates me is that American policing is at the local level by design.
I'm super glad that Ron is here today. Most of you know I've been a chaplain almost for 28 years now as a volunteer with the Costa Mesa Police Department. And over that tenure, I've had the opportunity to work or serve with 10 chiefs. You're number 11, both interim and full-time. I could give you the list of names, but I won't bore you with that. But obviously, as a chaplain and as a pastor in the community, I've learned a lot. I've had the opportunity to ride-alongs and to weddings and funerals and you name it. I've really gotten to get to know what it's like to be a first responder. And so I wanted the chief to come today, Ron to come today. We're on my turf now, so we got to be on a first-name basis, right? And for those of you who maybe saw the promo, I said, I want you to come just in your civvies. I don't really want you to wear your uniform, because what my hope today, brothers and sisters, is that you will get to see the man behind the badge. And more than that, hopefully you'll get an idea of really what is involved in being a first responder, a police officer particularly. And my hope is as you listen to him, and not only will you get an idea of maybe Costa Mesa and the Costa Mesa Police Department, but broader than that, it will maybe educate you a little bit is how can I pray for these men and women? How can I maybe be an encouragement to these men and women? So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So again, welcome. You want to say anything before we jump in?
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you for having me here. This is an honor. As a police officer, as a police chief, I always do my investigating before I show up someplace. And so today, believe it or not, is International Pastor Appreciation Day. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, I looked at it. It's on Google. Yeah. So I brought you an official police chief coin.
Outstanding. A police chief coin. That's awesome.
Pastor Appreciation Day.
Thank you so much.
I thought it ironic that you invited me here on Pastor
Thank you so
Appreciation.
very much. I had no idea. Thank you so very much.
But awesome. It is a pleasure to be here, and not only as your police chief, but honestly as a community member. I live in Costa Mesa here with my wife as well. In fact, I've met a few of my neighbors here this morning, and it's just a pleasure to get to know you better and on a personal level.
So Palm Harvest Church, for those of you who may or may not know about us, we are very civically engaged. We as followers of Jesus, we really take it seriously about taking our faith outside the walls of the building. And who is that?
That's my wife, Jennifer. And she and I have been married for 12 years.
Okay.
Got that one right. But we've been together about 19 years. And we have 4 children. Our oldest is 29. And then we've got 23, 22, and 20. The youngest is a sophomore at San Diego State.
So Jennifer's she's on parent duty right now, is she?
It's Parent Week in San Diego. So she just got back late last night, but was down there with our youngest.
Okay, we're going to swap out mics. Awesome. Thanks, Beto. Ron, here's a question I'm not sure you've ever been asked. Growing up as a kid, did you watch any TV?
I did.
Was there a television show, maybe, or a movie that influenced you to become a cop?
Actually, no. I grew up on a rice farm, and I had no perception of policing. Policing was not in my thought process. We had a guy named Phil Morrison who was our resident deputy, and we lived in a very small town. So when I grew up, no one ever said, go call 911 or go call the sheriff. They all said, go call Phil. So Phil Morrison was my reference to police work. And as I got into police work at the ripe old age of 19, I always told myself, I want to be like Phil, because Phil was that neighborhood guy that everybody trusted and just went to. It's almost like Andy Griffith, the Andy Griffith Show. And so Phil Morrison was my reference in law enforcement, and that was kind of my encouragement.
You mentioned the age of 19. Is that a typical age? Has that changed over the years? Like, are you finding that when people seek a career in law enforcement, is there a general age that most people start out at?
In California, you have to be 21 unless you work for a sheriff's department, and then you can be 18 because they put you in the jail. You're not on patrol.
Okay.
So in my case, I started the police academy at 19, and I was literally a deputy sheriff at 20 years old, which is really young. And then the rest is history. So next March will be 33 years total for me.
Wow.
And I've progressed up the ranks in different departments, mostly Northern California, and the last 3 cities as police chief. So this is my 3rd city as police chief.
And you're gonna see that as we talk today. You're gonna get a real firsthand experience of his experience as a chief, but we'll pull the layers around on that later. You know, as I have been a chaplain with the city of Costa Mesa, it seems to me like the last 5 years, just in general, the attitude towards law enforcement has really changed. You know, now we have defund the police, Black Lives Matter, which may have been, it has pros and cons, but there's, for the first time really in my career, so to speak, and my observation, the last 5 years have really changed the sort of the dynamics of law enforcement. Again, this is through my lens. What pressures have you noticed these social events and movements? What pressure is that putting on our cops these days?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of pressure, and I've seen in my almost 33 years a lot of change, and as you mentioned, in particular, the last 5 years. And what fascinates me is that American policing is at the local level by design. And what I mean by that, in the United States, there's over 18,000 law enforcement agencies. There's some 850,000 peace officers, which is a very small less than half a percent of the population. In California, we have over 500 law enforcement agencies and some 85,000 peace officers. But really, every community is different. Every city, every county has its own personality, and Costa Mesa has its own personality. It's different than, say, Los Angeles or San Francisco or Chicago. And what people perceive is that policing is one big, broad profession. And it is a profession, but we're not one big, broad team. It's uniquely different. I mean, your Costa Mesa Police Department is here to serve you, and we're here to serve you the way you expect. Every community has its own expectation of their police departments, and most people don't understand that. And the best police chiefs, the best police departments, the best sheriffs get out in venues like this and get to know you, and they get to ask questions, and they get to understand what it is that my community wants from their police department. So when we focus on that, and I know here in Costa Mesa we have a tremendous amount of support from our public, and that's because our police officers do a great job of serving the community. We don't always get it right. Of course, we make mistakes. But what I promise you is when we make mistakes, we own it, we learn from it, and we grow and we move forward. And that's my pledge to you.
You know, you talk about how every city is different, and it reminded me of the truth. People will sometimes ask me the question, well, how is Palm Harvest different than, such and such a church? And I'll say, well, the pastor, right? The church is going to take on the personality and the passions and the interests, right and wrong, good and bad, of the pastor. Would you say that's true also for a police department? Is the Costa Mesa Police Department, for example, beginning kind of take on the smell, if you will, of Ronald Lawrence?
I think that is very true. A leader sets the tone, and I'm blessed and fortunate with wonderful people in the police department. I've got tremendous talent, and when I got to Costa Mesa, I adopted a team that really embraced me and my vision. They wanted leadership. They wanted to know the direction of the organization. You mentioned I'm number 11 of 10 in the last several years in the office of the chief. It's good to have stability, but it's also good when you know it's time to go. And this is my third city as police chief. My last two, I've had great success. But both of those cities, I knew when it was time for me as the leader to go and let that organization flourish without me. And here in Costa Mesa, I tell people there's two things that I have to get right: who I hire and who I promote. If I get those two things right, my job becomes incredibly easy.
Yeah.
So they do take on the vision of the leader, of the chief. And in this case, they know what my expectations are, is that we serve our community with empathy. We leave people better than we found them. You know, we find people in their worst moments. They've suffered some tragedy. They've maybe lost a loved one. Maybe they've gotten arrested. Maybe they've been addicted to alcohol or drugs, and they've now found themselves in a situation where they get in a car crash, or they've gotten arrested, and we're there to pick them up. We're not there to hold them accountable. We're there to make sure that the Constitution is defended, that justice is served, and that the people that are arrested are held accountable by the criminal justice system. Our job is leave them better than we found them. Even those people we arrest, because they're people, they're God's people, and frankly, there's a level of redemption that has to occur, and we believe in that. So even the folks that we arrest, we treat them with respect, with dignity, because they're one of God's children.
Yeah. Location-wise, our campus is on Wilson Street, and we have a fire station just over here in the city yard and stuff. And so inevitably, and it may happen even today in our conversation, we'll hear sirens that go by. And to your point, those sirens are for people a real sense of hope. Like when you're calling 911 and you're in, things are going hanky, and you hear those sirens, that's like, let's go. And so we will even just stop in the middle, partly because you can't say anything, it's so loud, but just to take a moment and to pray for those first responders, and to pray for those individuals to whom they're going to serve. And so again, a teachable moment. Anytime you hear a siren, rather than get frustrated that you can't get to where you're supposed to be, pray for the people to where that fire truck or that police car is headed to, because they're when you hear that noise getting louder and louder, as long as it's not in your rearview mirror, right? You're excited about that. You mentioned how this is your third stint as a police chief in 33 years of law enforcement. How has this transition been different for you coming into Costa Mesa, and even in your leadership maybe approach? Is third time really the charm? Has it been good for you, or?
Yeah, well, Costa Mesa is a fantastic city, and I mentioned all of my other agencies were in Northern California, so this is the first time in Southern California, and we have one of our adult children's in Santa Barbara, we have two in San Diego, so this puts us right in the middle of most of them. My wife and I are empty nesters, so we get to enjoy the weather here and the beach. But the transition as far as the job goes, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of unique challenges that Costa Mesa faces, in that we have a lot of folks that are ready to retire. So really my skill set is the perfect match for Costa Mesa, because we're in this transition over the next 5 years, and making sure that we get the right succession planning, we get people in the right places in the organization, and we prepare for the future to even replace me someday. So I need to have people that are ready to be police chief. I need to have people ready to be captain, lieutenant, sergeant, and so forth. And so that's kind of my specialty, and that's why this really was the right match.
I never really thought about that in terms of your own probably candidating, for lack of a better term, as you were applying for this position, but Lorianne is currently Farrell's currently our city manager, and she was the one, right, who was interviewing you for this post. Was there some where I hadn't really thought about is maybe she probably was doing her own assessment of the retirements upcoming, for example, as you mentioned in her department. And so maybe, is it safe for me to assume that she was maybe looking for a chief who could help in that transition? Was that part of your conversations leading into your finally being hired?
Definitely, yeah. She was looking for a seasoned police chief that could take the organization through this weird gap that we've got and into the future. And so those were definitely the conversations we've had. And she's been a great boss. So the city manager hires all the directors. The city council, who you elect, hires the city manager, who's kind of like the CEO of the company. And then that person, the city manager, hires all the directors, the police chief, the fire chief, the public works director, and then we hire all of the staff in our own departments. And so she was definitely looking for a seasoned police chief that could take the police department to the next level, and it's been a great match.
So you mentioned our city council, you mentioned, the city manager. So here's one of the observations I've had over the last 28 years as a chaplain is the role of the police chief changes. I mean, when your command staff really are running the department and your captains are, they're really pulling the strings. But the one thing that maybe people don't know about the police chief is you're dealing with City Hall, right? And how do you balance law enforcement and politics? Because some chiefs, I would imagine, do better at it than others. But for you, how have you learned to develop that or balance kind of that role? Because is that an accurate observation, politics and law enforcement?
Yeah, it is. The uniqueness is that I'm non-political, and that's actually a burden lifted from my shoulders. I have to know politics. I have to know how to navigate through them, but I'm non-political as the police chief. I'm only concerned, in fact, I don't have a political lens. My lens is public safety. I have 115,000 people in Costa Mesa that I need to take care of and provide public safety. So that's the lens that I look through. And whether I'm dealing with somebody in politics or another civic person at City Hall, my objective is to make sure that we're providing the best service from the police department's perspective and defending the Constitution, enforcing the laws as appropriate. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about. In the California Penal Code, our people use this term law enforcement, and law enforcement is a piece of what we do. Yes, it's a tool that we have. We enforce the law. But when you look at the definition in the California Penal Code, we're called peace officers. Peace officers. We keep the peace. And you can keep the peace a whole lot of different ways. Yes, sometimes people have to go to jail. Yes, sometimes have to get a ticket. But that's not really what the Penal Code says. It says we keep the peace. And so when we look at our job and our role, when we respond to that critical incident or that issue that's in the neighborhood, how we keep the peace is really about leaving people better than we found them.
Transition. So in the Bible, there is the Old Testament and New Testament. So there's two sections. The Old Testament really deals with the times of the faith, of the Jewish faith leading up to the time of Jesus. And then the New Testament deals with the life of Jesus, his ministry, and then the beginnings of the early church. And in both sections, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, we can see mentoring relationships. Beginning with Moses and Joshua. Moses was one of the phenomenal leaders that led the Israelites out of slavery, as many of you know. And his apprentice, so to speak, was Joshua, who was then to lead the nation into the promised land. There's the prophet Elijah and Elisha, and even Mordecai and Esther. Mordecai and Esther were Queen Esther were cousins, and Queen Esther is in this position of really political. She's in on the throne with her husband, the king, and yet Mordecai, we can read how he is this mentor. That's sort of what we have, upward mentoring with Queen Esther. And then when you fast forward to the New Testament, one of the greatest early Christians was a guy by the name of Paul, and who was his protege? Everybody know? It was Timothy, right? Paul and Timothy, and then certainly Jesus and his disciples. Kirk Bauermeister, Dr. Bauermeister is here in our church, and he'll often say, Kirk's really great at leadership, and he'll often say a lot of people might disagree about whether or not Jesus was really the Son of God or not, but they won't disagree or they won't get upset about the fact that he was a leader. And so that's a long introduction to say mentoring is a big theme that's encouraged throughout the Bible, and it's something that we take very seriously here as well at Palm Harvest. But for you, when you think about your career, and you mentioned this man who sort of was your, at the age of 19, that maybe, facilitated or was a catalyst for you to go into law enforcement, can you think of other men or women maybe who served as mentors for you that have helped shape you to bring you to the place that you are at today?
Yeah, certainly in the profession itself, I've had many mentors, and I'll tell you a real quick story. In the mid-90s, I was a motorcycle officer. I was working for the city of West Sacramento, which is, as the name would infer, west of Sacramento. And I loved being a motorcycle officer. I mean, they were paying me to ride a motorcycle and go to crashes and write tickets, and it was a pretty good job. And it was a fun job, and there was a time and a place where I promoted to sergeant, and I was able to keep the motorcycle. So I was working patrol, and I was a motor sergeant as well. And my chief at the time, his name's Gary Leonard, still one of my mentors today. He threw there was a lieutenant process, and I thought, well, okay, if I promote to lieutenant, great, that's great for my career. But if I don't, the other guy, the motor sergeant, was also competing for lieutenant. If he got the job, then I would by default become the motor sergeant in charge of all the motors, which is like the coveted spot.
So it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
So the chief, Gary Leonard, calls me into his office, and he says, I'm going to promote the other guy to lieutenant. And I'm thinking, great, I've got the motor team now. He's going to hand me the unit. And he says, Ron, I want you to be my internal affairs sergeant.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh.
You guys know what that job is?
I thought I made him mad. What did I do to make this guy mad? So the internal affairs sergeant takes all the citizen complaints and investigates other police officers for misdoings or complaints of bad behavior or complaints of violation of policies or procedures. And so I got that job begrudgingly, and it was probably the best catalyst for my career because I pivoted and I saw a completely different side of police work. And that was a great transition for me because that was when I really kind of went into administration from that point.
So unpack that a little bit more. What specifically did you see that made you realize you wanted to go in a new direction?
Well, the internal affairs piece and administration is really about the care of the police department. It's like running a company, and you've got to make sure that you set the level of accountability, that there's a level of expectations, that you embrace the values of the organization, and that you hold people accountable. And accountability is not a bad word. If you think about discipline and accountability, those are good terms because those are what keep us healthy in a good place. It's like an athlete. An athlete disciplines themselves by working out every day or doing what they do every day, and they're very disciplined about that. And that's how I look at discipline in police work. It's not a bad thing. We have policies, we have procedures, and we need to make sure that we stay within those policies and procedures. They're there for a reason. And that was really a good catalyst for me. I mean, seeing the right piece of the behind the scenes of police work, if you will. Because like I mentioned, we don't always get it right. And sometimes people need to be held accountable.
Nice. So now we come to the favorite part of sort of my podcast interviews when I sit down with people. I call it kind of a word association game. And as I've already queued them up, kind of let them know what's coming. And in this piece, I'm going to mention a word or maybe a couple of words. And it's a chance for Ron to just vamp on it. You can talk as little, as short on a topic or as long, but a couple of these are what I call really underhanded, slow pitch balls. I think you're going to knock it out of the park. But again, as we listen to his response and as he talks about some of these words, I want you to listen to the passion with which he maybe speaks. And again, really listen to how can I know what's involved within the life of a police department and a police officer. And so, Ron, the first word, which should be easy for you, is the word culture. When you hear the word culture, what do you think?
When I think about the word culture, I think about in terms of the police department. It's really critical that I, as the police chief, set that tone. And I took the last year that I've been here and took a hard look at the police department. And I can write all the policies and procedures that I want to, unless our people are really embracing the vision and values that we've set forth. Then that's the culture. It's how people behave. And we're in a really good place with Costa Mesa PD right now. I mentioned we've got great people, and not just police officers, our dispatchers, our record staff, our crime scene investigators, our school resource officers. We have all kinds of people that work behind the scenes. And what I'm really happy with is our culture, because people have embraced an excitement in Costa Mesa, and they've really understood that, I'm not some big meanie chief that's going to come and really hit the hammer down. But really, I want them to feel empowered to do the great work that I know they can do.
Good.
That's culture.
Good. Succession.
Succession. Well, I mentioned that's one of the reasons I got brought into Costa Mesa, and really one of my strengths. When I was in Rockland as the police chief, which is a city in Placer County, about 5 years into it, I realized I had prepared captains to take my place. I had prepared lieutenants to be captains. And there came a point when I intuitively knew it was time to go. And I needed to get out of their way so that the culture could just move on without me there. And so I took the chief's job in Citrus Heights, which is Sacramento County, and lo and behold, 5 years later, the same thing happened. And I had people ready to take my job, and I needed to get out of their way. And so in Costa Mesa, I have a prediction that will happen again at some point. I don't know how long, but my history has been about 5 years. So I think about succession planning in those terms, meaning it includes me too. I need to have people prepared to take my job.
Yeah.
And the good thing about having a seasoned police chief is that this isn't about me. This is about the police department and making sure that we have the best Costa Mesa Police Department for this community.
You know, as the challenge with retirement is, especially in law enforcement, it takes you so many years to develop experience, right? And you have, when you talk about the upcoming retirements and thus the need for, raising the next group of leaders up, but you have all this institutional knowledge that leaves the house, and I would imagine for me as a pastor. Now I've been a pastor for almost 35 years, and it just gets more fun, right? It's like all these years of paying your dues and learning things. Things become a little bit easier, and hopefully my speaking's getting better. Church, I don't know if you'd give me a thumbs up on that or not, but you just grow, and so there's a sense of like, man, I feel like I'm really starting to gain some traction, and the runway ahead is still there. Do you feel that this is your third post as a chief? Certainly, you've got to be feeling something similar. How are you navigating kind of that? Is it still too early, or?
Well, to be honest, I was eligible to retire a few years ago.
Okay.
So you mentioned fun. I'm here because I'm having fun. I love my job, and I love policing. You also mentioned that in the last 5 years we've had a lot of challenges in the policing profession, and that's true. And I feel like God has put me in this place for a purpose, and that purpose is to help see the profession through this really strange time. And so I'm having fun. I love what I do. It's a calling, and I believe that I'm in the right place for that.
Excellent. Okay. Rocky and Jackson.
Jackson unfortunately passed away. So we've got two golden retrievers. Rocky, and then Jackson got sick. Unfortunately, we had to put him down, and my wife surprised me with a third golden retriever, Reagan. So we have Rocky and Reagan now. And if you live in my neighborhood here in Costa Mesa, you've seen me running Reagan, because he'll be 2 years old on Halloween. And I have to run him 1.5 miles every day, and if I don't, bad things happen. So I run him. Actually, he runs me. He's out in front of me.
Nice.
And then Rocky is almost 11 years old. He kind of toodles behind me. But they're just my soft spot. I love coming home to them. You have to love dog hair if you have golden retrievers, which we do. So they're my kind of my therapists, if you will.
Jesus in the Bible, in Luke chapter 5, verse 16, there's a verse that says, he often withdrew to lonely, out-of-the-way places to pray. And the leadership principle there is it's important to practice self-care. Right. You get on an airplane, most of you have flown on an airplane, and the flight attendants do their flight check, and they'll say, in the case of cabin pressure, an air mask is going to drop down, and if you're traveling with someone young, take the mask and put it on them first, right? Is that what they say? No, they say put the mask on yourself first, right? Practice that self-care, because if you pass out, you're not going to be of any help to anybody else. So for me, riding motorcycles is part of my self-care. It helps kind of fill up my tank and stuff. And so it sounds like for you, your golden retrievers play a role in that. Is there an intentionality to that for you?
Yeah, there is. And I wanted to touch on something you just mentioned. Policing is a unique profession, and we've got all of these people that have baggage. So they're carrying this tremendous amount of emotional baggage. They're handling calls for service that all of us, I won't say take for granted, but you have your police department, but we don't understand necessarily what they do. You as a chaplain understand because you've seen it, you've been there. But they go to these calls for service and they handle everything from a neighbor dispute to a sexual assault to a homicide to domestic violence to a fatal car crash. And it's just a lot of baggage, and we have to find a way to release those emotions. For me, it's the golden retrievers and my wife, honestly, who's my best friend. So we find ways to get out and relax and kind of unplug and think about just us. And you mentioned being intentional with us and being a family.
Yeah, it seems like the beach is something that you enjoy doing together as a couple.
It is. We take our bikes and we'll go right down to the river trail and end up on the beach in 20 minutes, and it's great.
Yeah. And by the way, on behalf of all the police chaplains that have ever served within the Costa Mesa Police Department, I want to say thank you because, as a pastor, there's this thing called clergy confidentiality. And that's a tremendous hall pass. Because when I get into a squad car, I'm there to assist in, having another set of eyes. And at the end of the day, help our officer come home safely. Inevitably, at their swearing in, whether it's a husband or wife there, I will say to them, my goal is the same as yours, is I want to help your husband or wife come home in one piece. And so my job as a chaplain, part of my job is to just let the air out of the tires a little bit, right? To get in and to know that there's a sense of that whatever we talk about, although now there's cameras and you got to be careful about, it's recording everything, but still to be able to just let that, help, because we all need to debrief just a little bit and let things out. So I'm glad, thank you for modeling that self-care for all of us. A couple more words. Donuts.
I used to eat donuts. I try not to anymore. Once I turned 50, the thing I miss most in my life is my metabolism. So I had to give up the donuts. But it is kind of symbolic for policing, and I think in my era in the early 90s that was true. But I avoid the donuts today.
We do have donuts at the back for those of you who do want to embellish. And then last question or word, Ron, it's the word justice. How would you unpack that word for us, justice?
If anyone has ever been a victim of a crime, what you often seek is justice. It feels wrong if you've been burglarized, for example. Somebody came into your house, they went through your things. If you got your car stolen, it just feels awkward, and it feels not good. And there's an unfairness there that someone caused you to be a victim. And I used property crime, but if you're a victim of a crime against person, it's even more serious. And it's really important for us as humans to feel that sense of right and wrong, that sense of fairness. Where did somebody have the ability to do that and go wrong in my life? So somebody else is affecting my life. And when I think about our job as peace officers, it's really to help those folks who are victims get through that time as well. Some of the most strangest or most challenging calls we deal with are sexual assaults. Those are really hard to deal with because it's for the victim, it's really hard. And we want to make sure that we're there and being empathetic, but at the same time, we can't necessarily attach ourselves to those emotions, because if we did, we'd be a complete train wreck. We just have to keep that separation between I've got a job to do right now, and that job is to make sure that victim gets justice for the crime that was committed against them.
Yeah. As a chaplain, one of the first things I was taught when I started getting training and stuff, and the Orange County Sheriff Department's really good at providing resources as well. But the divorce rate among law enforcement is super high. I mean, divorce is challenging in and of itself anyways, and many of us have been touched personally by that. And but among law enforcement men, it's like 90 in the upper 90%, 95, 96, maybe not that high anymore, but and women, it's in the high 70s. And all I want you to know is, as people as we're dealing with people's stuff, as you talk about, a lot of these officers, they internalize it, right? And so continue to pray for our men and women. And when you don't underestimate the value when you're out to lunch and you see a firefighter or a police officer and you just say thank you. Don't underestimate the value of that. It has tremendous value. And like I said, it helps kind of let the air out of the tires just a little bit. And so be intentional about doing that. A couple more things, and then we're going to wrap it up. You mentioned earlier that you and Jennifer chose to live in the city, right? What led you to that decision? What have been what are the pros and cons of that decision? Many of the people here at Palm Harvest are your neighbors, and so that's good. So I was joking with the chief earlier that if you don't like what he has to say and you get TP'd, it's probably somebody here. It'll be Joe Banning over there. But how did you guys make that decision? And have you regretted it?
Well, let me start with, if you TP my house, know as the police chief, I've got cameras just about everywhere.
Nice.
So I'll find you. I've done it both ways as a police chief. I've been the chief when I was the first CS chief, and I lived there. And then when I was a chief in Citrus Heights, we didn't live there. So I've experienced it both ways before I came to Costa Mesa. And there's a huge difference as the police chief living in the community, because I'm you. We're neighbors. We shop at the same grocery stores. Our kids, well, my kids are grown, but our kids go to the same schools. We go to the same restaurants. And when I'm with you as a neighbor, as a community member, that is a completely different feel as a police chief. It's much more intimate. I'm a Costa Mesan just like you, so I see the same potholes. I see the same speeders when people call and say, people are speeding down the street. I say, yeah, I know. I see them all the time. Because I'm living it. I'm living it with you. And there's power in that. And I use the word power, meaning as a community, because when you're calling and talking to me about things, I know firsthand what you're talking about. And if I haven't experienced it, I can go drive there and experience it myself. So me as a police chief, that's the only way to go, because it makes me a bigger part of the community.
And I think it really speaks to your priority and your value to be in the community, right? I'm not slamming those who choose to live outside the community, because we probably have Huntington Beach cops living in Costa Mesa, right? So it goes both ways. But it also speaks to your commitment to be engaged in the community. And church, we're really fortunate to have that. And so for those of you who are his neighbors, and I'm looking at you guys, be on the know where he lives, and every time you drive by his house and Jennifer's house, pray for him. That God gives him wisdom and counsel, guidance, and as we talk about all the time, expanded influence. Because we're glad you're living in the city, and we're grateful for it. Last question: how can we pray for you? How, as we as a church and as a community who are tuning in online, how can we pray for you?
Well, I would ask that you pray for the men and women of your police department and your fire department, our public safety professionals. I mean, I'm plugged in 24 hours, 7 days a week. My phone is constantly on, and the concern that I have is that the men and women are being safe. In the middle of the night, I'll get a text or a phone call, and I have many sleepless nights about some critical incident that's happening. And I would ask that you pray for our people, because they're people just like you. They're people that are going to do God's work and help people in their most tragic moments in life. And we want to make sure that our peace officers, our firefighters, are resolute getting through those situations. And you mentioned something. If you see them, to thank them. That goes a long way. You're absolutely correct. If you just say, thank you for what you do, I'm praying for you. The reaction might be, hey, thank you. They might seem surprised or almost short, because you probably caught them off guard. But just know that they're walking away from that feeling loved. And that's a lot more powerful than you might imagine.
Yeah. And when you approach them, have your hands visible. Have your hands visible. Let's pray for the chief. Join me for prayer. Lord, thank you so much for today's conversation. Thank you for leading Ron and Jennifer to Costa Mesa. And as they kind of dig their roots in, we pray that this would be a life-giving community that they can flourish within. And Lord, as Ron now is into his second year as the chief of police for our city, I pray that you would continue to expand his intuition, that these years of experience, these 33 years of law enforcement experience, that you would just build upon that. And as he strives to entrust and empower his command staff, Lord, as he strives to raise up the next generation of community leaders, we pray that you would guide him. And that you would bring the right people around him to help him on that journey. So, Lord, thanks again for this time together. We do pray for the men and women, those at dispatch, the people we never see, not only the ones who have a badge and a gun on their side, but Lord, for our whole first responder community, both fire and police department, we ask your favor upon them today and use them today to be your hands and feet. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. And all God's people said, amen. Okay, one last thing. Melody, come on up. Help me out here. We have a gift for you and Jennifer.
Very kind. Thank you so much.
This one's for Jennifer, obviously. I think she likes that color, so
Very
you could pass that one to him.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chief of Police, everybody. Let's thank him. Take this here.